Thank you. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. It is fantastic to see probably the last little droplets of energy left after yesterday's party. I hope you all had a good time. From my role at Esomar, I look at the industry a little bit, from a bird's eye point of view, right? From high up, and I try to see the interactions, what is going on, where the industry is headed, how it all plays together. And it struck me the other day that we're probably related to one of the, say, brainiest industries out there. And when my colleague, Rhiannon, head of events, told me that, my presentation looked to her a little bit like the connections on a chipboard. I had to think about probably another brainy game that I used to be more hooked to than I am willing to admit, probably. I don't know if anybody knows these graphics. Does anybody know this game? Oh, not really? No one? Okay, yeah. It was not probably the most popular one. But beyond that, what it struck me as well was more than being or as brainy as the function can be, when, as they say, when the tire meets the road, at the end, everything becomes a bit more messy, right? Like the competition landscape is way more fierce, a lot more is going on. So rather than playing the insights game, on a clean slate and trying to resolve it, what it looks more like is rather than playing the insights game, right? We have different players, we have different relationships, we have characters that are actually, wow, these guys are big. that are like really shaping the industry, right? So let's get a little bit through the list and see what we can make of it. We can begin with probably the simplest one, which is the final client. Final client who actually holds the budget and decides how to spend it, right? These clients have been creating over the years insights departments, right? And these guys have a set of skills. When they have these budgets, they need to decide, what I was saying, how to spend it, which part they can internalize and which part they would commission outside. So what we found in our global users and buyers of insights from 2023 that we just released a couple of days ago was a character that would usually leverage from their own internal data, right? It could be from their CRM systems. And they are fairly aware of what they can do and what they cannot do, what their limitations are. So they would engage in usually simpler or low-risk projects. And they would compile further data through online questionnaires and surveys, which usually tend to be quantitative in nature, to understand their users or their consumers. And they would top it up with occasional analytics too. These are the types of projects that they would usually internalize. This means that what is left is what they usually commission outside, right? So enter the second player, which would be the insights providers. And these guys are engaged when the client wants to carry out usually larger, more complex, or types of projects that require of high specialization that cannot be sourced in-house, right? They would also commission qualitative projects, which usually are harder to carry out internally. And also when they need to kind of like look at the entire market, for example, they need to do large studies. And they would also engage them to carry out like strategic, high-risk projects where they need these kind of deep insights and also, of course, heavy analytics that cannot be sourced internally. So here we have a little bit like the basic relationship. Allow me to make a small detour here. If we superimpose these two sets of, these two characters, I know this is not comparable, one-to-one, but I would like to highlight just a basic fact. Whether you are using internal data from your CRM systems, or whether you are looking at the entire markets and doing large studies, whether you are using online questionnaires or whether you are collecting data more broadly, what at the end of the day, or what we found was just how much you need to engage individuals, right? This is, at the end of the day, the real data provider, right? Where do I want to go with this? To this notion about the respondent experience. And what we saw and what we covered in our global market research report that we also published a couple of days ago was that if whoever knows this game, and I just found out yesterday that we have it in the other room, that the respondent was or has been or is usually treated not as good as they could. What happens is that if you treat the client as basically as if you exploit the respondents, you end up damaging the relationship with the respondents. And Esomar has been doing quite some work into understanding this relationship, what is going on. We have a project called the Global Data Quality Study, and we also cover this in a bit more in depth in the global market research. However, I just want to encourage us to think about this, to think about just how vital respondents are. Treat them less like the poor little car in this game, and instead, engage into practices that allow us to keep them engaged, also also in the long run, so that we ensure that they continue to provide us with data. In any case, what we end up seeing is this basic relationship, right? We have the clients hold the budget, and they engage agencies whenever they need those insights. At the end of the day, their budget, as I always say, becomes the industry's turnover. And the industry has been actually doing fairly well. We estimate that the global turnover is about to hit and surpass $130 billion in 2022. This was after a linear growth of almost 12%. So these are all quite interesting figures. But I would like to draw your attention to a specific detail in this graph. And, isn't that cute? Well, while I was blanking out some of the bars, and while you were distracted with the little fella parachuting and safely making it to the ground, we just found out that the data analytics side of the industry just surpassed in turnover globally that of the market research. And this has some implications, because the game continues to change. So we see that this very simplistic relationship of agency-client is not such. In this moment, we need to include a new player into this industry, right? And this would be all these companies that allow for the internalization of insights, right? All this data as a service, software as a service, all these platforms, the analytics, etc. And what we need to understand is that the budget of those clients now needs to satisfy, or needs to be funneled to make the choice of what goes to one player and what goes to the other player that is providing all those tools. All this is basically summarized in our Global Insights Overview. It's a whole package with 3 reports, each one specialized in one of these elements. So you can see more about these dynamics. So now we are starting to see a picture that starts slowly looking a little bit more complex, right, than in the beginning. These players, of course, are not stupid. As they are providing services, they start realizing that they could just as well provide services to each other, right? So then we start seeing a different set, a different dynamic also playing out. So what we can do is look at these 2 players, but again, from a different angle, from a different perspective. So, enter again these insights providers. And these guys are fantastic at direct collection, which is what has been, or what has happened, well, most historically, right? They have depth, experience, and know-how on the insights industry, right? They have been ruled by a by a solid code of ethics for decades, right? They engaged in usually descriptive statistics, descriptive methods. They have been dealing, and we saw this a couple of slides ago, with challenging response rates, relatively low. And the turnover growth has been moderate, not particularly high, as we also just saw. So, but this makes up this particular player. Now, let's enter this other player. All these other companies. And these companies are fantastic at all this passive collection, right? All this influx of data pouring in. They engage in analytics. They were born from IT. They created software, but that allowed them to carry out or to perform all these analytics services. They may not have as much experience or as much know-how in what is the insights function, because they come from a different angle. But they may not be dealing with low response rates, but instead they are dealing with a challenge of consumer privacy settings, right? We have more and more consumers setting up the highest privacy, trying to share the least data possible. So that is something they find as a challenge. They may not have developed so many purely research capabilities. That may be coming as well, right? But we have seen that turnover growth has been quite substantial, as we also saw a couple of slides ago. So allow me to, same thing, superimpose these two types of players to highlight why they may start playing together. And if, as a sector, some companies may be positing or declaring relatively moderate growth, you may want to liaise and to associate with companies that are actually shooting up to try to continue to attract investment and to do and to continue to move ahead. Active data collection may want to count with passive data collection to try and complete that picture. There are like many reasons why they would play together. So now we are starting to see how actually one type of company is the client of the other company. They are playing together, offering services and closing ties. They are closing ties so much so that eventually it leads to, well, mergers, acquisitions, and a higher degree of consolidation. And we saw this in our global top 50 insights companies that we also released a couple of weeks ago. So, so we are also uncovering a different set of dynamics. But let me go back for 1 second to that original client, right? As I was mentioning before, they know what they can internalize, and like all these simple projects, etc., and how they would externalize the most complex, the most delicate ones, and the most and the high risk. So what do they ask from their suppliers when they engage in or when they commission research? What they need is for the supplier to actually liaise, to partner with them, not as a supplier that just comes in, creates a project, and leaves, but as a partner that goes there, understands the business, understands the challenges that they are going through, understands the market they're in, and can provide their strategic analysis. They can provide consultancy services. They can guide the industry, right? They need to provide an expertise and a level of specialization that cannot be sourced in-house, right? So these are a few elements that we also found in our reports that clients keep on asking for. Of course, some other things, more actionable insights, high speed and agility, and surprisingly, actually, quite a few responses on working on bad or unclear sales. So basically, having a sales proposition differentiation is many clients find how many agencies actually have quite lousy positioning. So that was quite surprising. In any case, they are asking for these things. Maybe you can, think look at your own companies, depending on where you are, and see if you provide this type of guidance. They keep on asking for this. If this type of services are not provided, what happens in the industry is that there is a gap, right? A gap is created. And as we all know, in a competitive landscape, when a gap is created, you can bet that someone is going to come and fill in this gap. So enter player number 4, which are a type of player that has been positioning, perhaps, you know, like maybe a bit more, that has been positioning into offering all these types of services that clients keep on asking for, right? And these guys provide all this strategic guidance. They provide, of course, all these consultancy services. That's what they do, right? And actually, they have quite high margins for providing these things. These players have generated or have created quite substantial analytics teams, so they can also process all the data and create these insights. And they have started to encroach a bit more into all the research function. They are starting to to expand these services, even though insights is by far not the one thing they naturally do. It's more like, I'm not going to say an afterthought, but it's not something that they primarily focus on. So here we have uncovered quite a complex set of dynamics in which, well, basically everybody is everybody else's client, right? So now you can see a little bit how the entire game comes together. Of course, we have the original clients, but now this guy needs to decide how the budget is created. Does it go, you know, into internal insights? Okay, fine, I need those tools. Does it go into, do I need to commission external insights, external projects? Well, I know then who to go and who to engage. If I work in the agency side, who's my client? The client could be, of course, those insights teams, but they will also be those consultancy firms that need primary data to start to get some of their research going too. If I'm in a data analytics company, then my client would of course also be those teams that want to internalize research, but it would also be those consultancy firms that need to process all that data and need all the tools as well, right? And consultancy firms would provide all this strategy, all the guidance to the final client. And among the two, agencies and data analytics would benefit from each other's services, the mergers and acquisitions, consolidation that is happening in the industry, the expansion of the portfolio of services and the offering that they may want to do, and further synergies, right? So we can see that the answer is not as simple as it may have appeared at the beginning. And with this, I want to maybe get away a little bit from this kind of aggressive playground that I have presented here, right? The highly competitive landscape with maybe not even players, but fighters. But I hope that I provided a bit more insight into these dynamics so that we can play the game less as the fighters and perhaps more through using our brain. Thank you. Yes.